what's coming in React 19? Well, in this article here that you can see at my URL, and I'll also make sure to have it linked in the description below, we get a kind of sneak peek at what React 19 might look like and some different features that are coming. So based on this article here, React mentions that one kind of major thing that's coming is a React compiler. And here they mention that the compiler is no longer a research project and actually works in production on Instagram.com. So they've been working on this kind of custom React compiler that is going to provide some benefits, and they already have it in production here. And as they've kind of mentioned in previous posts here, React can sometimes re-render too much when state changes. And since the early days of React, solutions for this have been use memo, use callback, and memo APIs to kind of manually tune how React re-renders. And I have videos on all those things. And, if you're new to React, those things can be particularly a little bit tricky and a little bit of a pain to kind of implement. And they mention just that here. They're kind of honest about it, which I appreciate it. They mention that it clutters up code, it's easy to get wrong, and it requires extra work to keep up to date, which I would 100% agree with all those different things. And here they mention that it's a compromise and they weren't satisfied. So they wanted to kind of make this compiler so they can have React automatically re-render just the right parts of the UI when state changes without compromising on React's core mental model, which, was kind of the promise of React from the start. You would just re-render little components of your page without triggering re-renders of your entire component tree, which often ends up happening in React apps without using some of those kind of manual fine-tuning processes. And they believe that React's approach, UI as a simple function of state with standard JavaScript values and idioms, is a key part of why React is so approachable. And they also mentioned that JavaScript has some challenges from time to time, and that's largely because of its kind of loose and dynamic nature, which is kind of a benefit of JavaScript and also a downside. And the React compiler is able to compile code safely by modeling both the rules of JavaScript and rules of React. For example, React components must be idempotent, returning the same value given the same inputs, and can't mutate props and state values. So here it kind of goes on to say that the compiler will basically let you know if you're kind of breaking the rules of React, which should help you prevent like re-rendering your entire component tree and having some of these re-renders that really slow down your application and just kind of make it a not so great process. And here it does go on to say that it does want to, still allow developers to be flexible and bend the rules a bit, but it wants to provide some of these safeguards in compiling that can kind of prevent some of the issues that we've had with React and, mainly having to do things like use memo, use callback to kind of skip some of those unnecessary re-renders, which, if they nail this, that would be actually really, really nice. And here it says, if you're curious about the rules of React, check out enabling strict mode and configuring React's ESLint plugin. So yeah, that's definitely one major feature that's coming here. And then they also discuss actions. So if you've followed my stuff before, you know that Next.js has this thing called server actions. And this looks very similar at first glance without kind of diving into it and, trying to implement it and playing around with it a little bit more. But they kind of mention here that they're exploring solutions for sending data from the client to the server with server actions. So you can execute database mutations and implement forms. During development of server actions, they extended these APIs to support data handling in client-only applications as well. So here you can see an example that they show to where you could create a search server action. So if a user has a search input and they submit their search, you could just call a server action, which one thing that I'm noticing with using server actions in Next.js is that it reduces a lot of the need for, handling a lot of state and different things like that when using forms, which is definitely a big plus in my mind. So the action function can operate sync or asynchronously. You can define them on the client using standard JavaScript or on the server using the use server directive, just like in Next.js. They'll also provide you hooks like use form status and use form state. So you can manage the form status and form state easier in your application without necessarily needing to manually doing that. And it mentions that actions are submitted within a transition, keeping the current page interactive while the action is processing, which is also really nice. So it's going to be non-blocking. And then alongside actions here, they're introducing a feature called Use Optimistic for managing optimistic state updates, which basically will allow you to apply temporary updates that are automatically reverted once the final state commits. They mentioned that this relates to actions because this allows you to optimistically set the final state of the data on the client, assuming the submission is successful, and then revert to the value for data received from the server, or like your source of truth. So that's also a pretty cool feature alongside server actions. And then here they talk about how this can be beneficial for library authors. So alongside actions, as well as their React compiler, they also mention this kind of React Canary, which basically allows you to opt in to stable features before they're necessarily released in a stable version of React. So they're kind of a change to the way we develop React. Previously, features would be researched and built privately inside Meta. But with Canaries, they're building in the public with the community to finalize features they share in the React Labs blog series, meaning you can hear about features sooner as they're being finalized. So here they kind of discuss that for React server components, asset loading, document metadata, and actions, they've all landed in React Canary. And they've added docs for these features as well on React.dev. So for these features, you have these directives. So use client, use server, which basically marks the kind of distinction between server and client components, which is pretty cool. You have document metadata, where they added built-in support for title, meta, and meta link tags anywhere in the component tree. So this would replace something like React Helmet. They have asset loading, so integrated suspense with the loading lifecycle of resources such as styles, fonts, and scripts, so that React takes them into account to determine whether the content elements like style, link, script are ready to be displayed. And they've also added preload and pre-init to provide a greater control of when a resource should load. And then, as I kind of mentioned above, they also have actions support. So all these features are now available in React Canary, and here in what they mention, the next major version of React Canary is now ready to ship to React at latest. The new features mentioned above, so all of these kind of major features here are compatible with any environment in which your apps run, since asset loading and document metadata might be breaking changes for some applications. The next version of React will be a major version, React 19. And then they say there's, still more to do, yada, 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 but you can expect these features in the next version of React. It's going to be a major version of React 19, and some of these might be breaking changes. So with that, that's kind of what you can expect coming up here for React 19. I think it'll be really cool to, once it finally does get released and stuff, I can start kind of playing around with some of these features and showing you some more tutorials. So thanks for tuning into this video. I hope you found it helpful, and I'll see you in that next one.